After more than 2 years of a brutal Israeli-Hamas war, there's a breakthrough. All 20 of the remaining living hostages held by Hamas have now been released, according to the Israeli military. In return, Israel freed over 1,900 Palestinian prisoners. Still, there is no instant peace. So what does this exchange mean for Gaza, for Hamas, and for regional stability? Joining us now to break it all down is Asher Lubotzky, who is a teaching fellow and scholar in residence in the Department of Political Science at the University of Houston. Doctor, welcome to Hello Houston.
Hello, Bill. Thank you for having me again.
Yes,
on your
welcome
show.
back.
Thank you. If you've got questions, comments, you'd like to join the conversation, as always, reach out to us at 713-440-8870. Before we get into all the nuts and bolts of this, I just want to understand the difference between a ceasefire, which we understand is happening, and a resolution to the conflict or end of the war. I think a lot of people are conflating the two. Where actually are we at, and what's the difference here?
Right, that's a very good question. So we are right now in a ceasefire, and we are cautiously optimistic that this is also the end of the war. It's not final, obviously. It can always anything can happen in the Middle East, but it seems also by some statements of Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, that this war, at least in its previous shape, is over. There might be still, obviously, the conflict is not over. It will not be over probably in the foreseeable future. But this war seems like on the way to being over for the time being. What does it mean? Does it mean that we'll have a year of quiet, 5 years of quiet, 5 years of peace, 10 years of peace? We don't know. Hopefully, obviously, it will be as long as possible. But it looks that a fragile ceasefire is still holding for now. And the war, both sides, both parties want it to be over.
Mm-hmm. And when we, Dr. Lubotzky, when we look at this, and we one of the questions that I continue to ask myself, or I'm seeing a lot of people, analysts asking, is when and how will Hamas be disarmed, and what is that going to look like? And then where will the arms go?
Exactly. This is the main question that everybody is considering right now, right?
Yeah.
Some people are very skeptical that it's going to happen. Even if it doesn't happen, it doesn't mean that we are going back to full-scale war, especially at the extent that we saw before. But yeah, this is a very complex issue. This is a very complex issue. Trump's plan, President Trump's proposal, is talking about some kind of stability force that is going to demilitarize the Gaza Strip. Hamas said they're not going to do it. Hamas said they're not going to give their arms back. So there's going to be maybe some pressure needed here from Hamas allies, countries like Qatar or Turkey. This is the main obstacle for achieving something of a lasting peace, or a kind of a more durable peace between Gaza and Israel. And that's exactly what we don't know how it would look like. But it doesn't mean, even if it fails, it doesn't mean we're going back to war immediately. There are many other ways to pressure Hamas that some countries may be doing.
And Dr. Lubotzky, that now that you mentioned the new security force that President Trump talked about establishing in Gaza, he did say that security force would be made up of troops from other nations. Is it known at all which countries would be sending forces over? I understand Hamas is being, resistant to it, but from our standpoint, from President Trump's, do we know anything like that?
Right, so it's far from being, final.
Mm-hmm.
The countries still need to discuss it. The plan itself says Arab countries.
Arab countries.
Okay, that's what Trump's plan says explicitly. So we can assume that countries like Egypt, maybe the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, maybe the UAE, the Emirates, Maybe others. We know that Turkey wanted. They said something about sending some troops there. This is not necessarily something that Israel would like to see, but it may happen.
Right.
We heard some European countries like France and Italy saying that they would like to send forces. So you do have a bunch of potential candidates.
Right.
But again, this is far from being a done deal.
So I have a question. I know how the media and the cameras can show just what they want to show. So saying that, it looks to me like Gaza is nothing but rubble. Who's going to go in there and build it back?
Right. Gaza is obviously in a pretty devastating state. It's not completely just rubble. Of course, we see, as you said, right, we see the photographs of the rubble, but there is also a lot of areas in Gaza that were relatively unarmed or armed in a minimal way, especially central Gaza, the central of the strip. So there is something to work with. We are talking about, I just heard now some estimations that it would cost something like 70 or 80 billion dollars. I think the UN said that, or some other international body estimated that it would cost something like that to rebuild Gaza. Now, according to the Trump's plan, mostly this money will be given by wealthier Arab states. I assume this means countries like the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar maybe, and so on. So there are also here enough candidates that would be willing to donate the money. The issue is that we are not yet rebuilding, right? It's not yet the rebuilding stage until Hamas disarms, right? Until you demilitarize the strip. Here, this will be the next kind of contention and the liberation debate, right, between the parties. When does the aid come in Gaza? Can it come in before Hamas completely demilitarize itself or not? And this will be a very fierce, maybe lengthy debates.
Well, can this really work when their whole mission is to destroy Israel?
This is the problem. This is the main problem. The idea that Hamas still sticks to power and still officially never endorsed the two-state solution. Hamas never did. The PA, the Palestinian Authority, the more moderate body of Palestinians controlling the West Bank, they are committed to the two-state solution. So with them, it might work, right? But they are weak on the ground in the Gaza Strip. They were kicked out from the Gaza Strip by Hamas. And Hamas, as you said, never endorsed the existence of Israel. For them, when they say resistance or they say free Palestine, they mean all of it, right? From the river to the sea, right? The slogans that we heard quite a lot in the last 2 years. That means totally annihilation of the state of Israel, and this is the main problem. If Hamas maybe would change their core ideology and would issue a statement recognizing the two-state solution, maybe there will be some more space to make some progress here. But otherwise, it would be very hard to do that, because what Hamas imagines for the conflict is maybe a long-term ceasefire, as we said, right? In Arabic, it's called Hudna, right? Maybe 5 years or 10 years of ceasefire, but they never talk about recognizing the state of Israel or the two-state solution. So this still is obviously very problematic. We'll have to see. Time will tell, and Hamas may be coming out of this war maybe weaker than before, maybe stronger. We still don't know. It's really fresh, but we'll have to see.
We are speaking with Dr. Asher Lubotzky, a teaching fellow and scholar in residence in the Department of Political Science at the University of Houston, about the peace deal between Israel and Hamas. If you would like to join the conversation, you can call or text 713-440-8870.
A couple questions on what you were just saying there. When you talk about the two-state solution yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, President Trump was asked and said on this plane, one state, two state, we don't know. Seems like that would have been an important part of what they are moving forward with here. So that lack of clarity, at least to reporters, seems interesting. But then that also takes me to what exactly was signed yesterday. who were, because all the players weren't there and papers got signed, but as I watched it yesterday, we didn't know exactly what was being signed. What do we know now, and how does all this play together?
So first, it's very interesting that whatever was signed yesterday, it was without the two main parties of the specific war, right? Israel was not there and Hamas weren't there. So there is a lot of very important countries, and this is a very important progress. I'm not belittling the progress or the achievement, but still it was among countries that were not fighting in the last 2 years, right? So they all committed to peaceful resolution and not going back to war and dignity for Palestinians. I do not believe they said something about the state. I don't think the United States, especially under the Trump administration, is willing to endorse this yet. But they, so in the end, they said things that were very positive in terms of talking about peace and rebuilding of Gaza and so on, but they were not the countries fighting, right? So they have some limited influence over that. And specifically, though, what President Trump has been saying regarding the Palestinian state is that, as you said, right, when he's asked, he's saying something we'll have to see, or whatever the parties would want. So he's not negating it, but he's not also endorsing it. The American stance, especially under Democratic presidents, is to endorse the two-state solution as the main solution for the conflict. The Trump
he froze up on us there. Hopefully he will.
planned from his first tenure, right, 2019. Yeah, the Trump plan is talking about actually Palestinian state, right? Much smaller than was proposed before, but still talking about. So Trump in his past did talk about eventual kind of outcome of having Palestinian state established. But the peace right now is not committed to this.
A quick follow-up to that. Currently, who owns, if that's the right word, the region called Gaza? Is that whose is that right now?
That's a very good question. So right now, after following the last few days, okay, there's a dramatic change because of the deal.
Right.
We have about 50% of it is controlled by Israel still, 50%, and which are not so inhabited. Okay, those regions are more either agricultural or battlefields, previous battlefields, so they are relatively pretty empty of people. The other 50% is controlled mostly by Hamas. Now, this is a very good question because we saw in the last few months that a few local militias in Gaza, some of them opposed Hamas, took over some parts of Gaza. Okay, not major parts, but few towns, few streets sometimes, or neighborhoods, but you saw a few local militias doing that. Some of those militias, as reported, were also collaborating with Israel. What we see now, Hamas took over because Israel withdrew in the last few days. Israel withdrew from about 25% of the strip. So Israel used to control, like if you talked to me 2 weeks ago, it says that Israel controls about 75% of Gaza Strip. Okay, now it's only about 50. Israel withdrew from about 25%. In those 25%, Hamas is coming back in, and they are now, right now, as we speak, fighting very brutally. In this thing, I don't think it's covered by the Western media, but Hamas right now, there is a civil war pretty much in those 25% between Hamas and the local militias. Very brutal videos. I do not wish you to watch them, but very brutal videos of killing among Gazans, among Palestinians.
Going on right now.
Do you see Tony Blair having a role in any of this, and if so, what?
So I know President Trump really wants Tony Blair to play a role. They even said that in the kind of the drafts of the proposal that Tony Blair should be the head of this kind of board of peace, this kind of a big kind of super government that will supervise Gaza in the post-war years. We know that there was some objections to Tony Blair's kind of being in charge of this by the Palestinians, among others. So Tony Blair is mentioned in the plan, but he was moved. Again, it's all theoretical because it's still only on the paper. It was moved aside to be part of the board, but the head of the board would be President Trump himself, according to President Trump's plan. Okay, I know that Hamas they object very strongly any non-Palestinian personality figure having any kind of executive powers over Gaza. So that will be something that will have to be debated. I know the Americans do want Tony Blair to be there. Maybe some other Arab states also want Tony Blair to be there. He's a pretty popular, well-esteemed figure in the region. So it might happen, but there will be strong objections, especially from Hamas, to including him.
Dr. Lubotzky, we hear and see what the major world leaders are saying. President Trump has come out that he's extremely optimistic, and this truly is a momentous time. But do you really think that this is a path forward for the people that have been devastated by this war on both sides? What does that look like for them?
Yes, you see the videos of happiness and
Yes.
celebrations in both places, in
Yes.
Gaza and in Israel. You don't see it on campuses. You don't see people celebrating campuses in America. That's a different question. But in Israel, in the region, and in Gaza, you see people celebrating this. And again, of course, you have Trump, President Trump, he has his own style, right? And
Yeah.
he's promising that this is the end of 3,000-year conflict. Maybe it's not that. It's probably not going to be the end of the conflict, but still, it's a huge achievement. It's as it looks now, it ended the war. As it is, this was the longest war that Israel has ever fought. This was, we know that the hard toll that it took from both populations, and especially the population in Gaza. And right now, there are no strikes. Okay, there are no strikes. There's no attacks against Israeli forces. There are no strikes against Gazans. So people are happy. The hostages are out, as you released, as you said. So people, both in Israel and in Gaza, seem to be relieved. Now, some people are still cautious about it, right? Because it's not the end of the conflict. Maybe we'll talk in a few months. You'll call me again to your show in 6 months, and we'll be back in war. But so far, this is the biggest achievement that we have seen in the last 2 years, and it's remarkable. And we have some reasons to be a bit optimistic today.
Thank you.
Dr. Ash Lubotzky, a teaching fellow and scholar in residence in the Department of Political Science at the University of Houston. Thank you for being back on and joining us on Hello Houston.